Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to this TSVP talk of today. And today's speaker is Professor Kalle Parvinen from the University of Turku, who will talk to us about how can mathematics help to understand evolution by natural selection. Kalle and I know each other already for a long time, about 30 years, and we have been collaborating continuously over these 3 decades. So it's really nice that you are here and that you can also be here for a longer period thanks to the affiliation with the TSVP program, which I think is doing a great job in bringing a lot of intellectual inputs to our small campus. And I think we should all commend them for that effort and these successes. So Kalle got his PhD in mathematics from the University of Turku in the year 2001. And what unites our interests in research are the questions how to combine ecology and evolution and how to describe evolution with sufficient realism to account for ecological complexity. And Kalle and I have therefore worked on adaptive dynamic theory, which is a framework for achieving this. And I think Kalle will cover it quite carefully in his talk in a way that is understandable to a broad range of scientists. And Kalle has also worked on another type of complexity called metapopulation complexity. So when you look outside, biological nature comes in patches, and these are in the matrix or the habitat for metapopulations. So they're called metapopulations because they're populations of populations. So sets of populations, metapopulations, and one can even do adaptive dynamics for these metapopulations, which is another topic Kalle has worked on. And if you only remember one message from this talk, or one bottom line from this talk, is that evolution by natural selection is so much more than optimization. And the idea that evolution is just optimizing some objective function, even though it's common in engineering and maybe in physics, is not doing justice to what happens when you put evolution in an ecologically realistic context. And that is what Kalle will tell us about. So let us jointly welcome Kalle, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. So thank you for this nice introduction. I'm very happy to be here at OIST. So today we'll talk about evolution and mathematics, how these things go together. And as Ulf already briefly told us, then many people might think that evolution is an optimization process. So then one could think that when we have different types of individuals, then they have different phenotypes or traits, and then each phenotype could be given some fixed number called fitness. And then what then would be a quite natural process afterwards is that those phenotypes which have higher fitness, they outcompete those which have lower fitness, and eventually it's a kind of hill climbing that the one on the top of the hill will win the competition, so-called survival of the fittest. That's also a term what one often hears when talking about evolution. But I might now a bit disappoint you, or maybe not so much anymore surprise you, or give you some further insight that this is not how it works. Sorry, it's not. It doesn't work this way. How does it work then? Let's look at the details. So if we think of fitness or some measure of goodness of phenotypes, then one should take into account that this fitness depends on really many things. So it depends on the present environment, and the environment should be taken as a kind of broad concept, that this environment can consist, for example, of the availability of various resources, what the individuals are using, and then also how many other individuals there are present. So there can be so-called density-dependent selection, but also the composition of the other individuals, so other populations in the system. That does affect the fitness of each phenotype in general. So the fitness, so this fitness is not a static fitness landscape, but instead it's constantly moving. So as soon as the behavior or phenotype composition of the population changes, so does the fitness landscape change. So we have a so-called eco-environmental feedback loop. So the present population determines then or affects what the environment is. And then whatever the current environment is, that together with the phenotypes present, that determines what is the fitness of each phenotype. And then those phenotypes which have higher fitness than others, they increase in frequency and others decrease in frequency. So therefore the composition of the population changes. And then we go back to step one. Again, the new present population affects the environment. And this loop goes on and on. And in general, in this theory of adaptive dynamics, we are interested in what happens in the long term as a result of this kind of process. And let's we can now denote as R this invasion fitness or fitness, and it depends so now on S, so the phenotype or trait of the focal individual, and E, the environment, whatever variables you then need to describe this. So then how do we then start working with adaptive dynamics? Then first we need to construct a mathematical model describing the population dynamics, or so to say the ecology of the system. And what is important in this modeling is that to keep in mind that each trait or phenotype must be a feature of an individual. So it is the individual level properties that can be inherited by other individuals. So we can't really study evolution from some population level properties. Of course, various population level properties do change as a result of evolution by natural selection, but it is important that it's the individual features that will pass on to the next generation. So once we have constructed a population model describing the ecology or population dynamics, then we want to find that what are the stable states or equilibria, or so-called population dynamical attractors. And then we can make an assumption that, okay, once the current population is at a population dynamical attractor, then what happens if a rare variant appears? So a variant is an individual or small collection of individuals who behave a bit differently from the present individuals. And then we make an invasion analysis. So we ask that does the variant or maybe the resident population win? And if this variant has positive fitness and starts to grow, then what happens as a result of such an invasion? And then in the long run, we want to study what happens as a consequence of several events like this. So let's look at an illustration. So what we have in this figure, so on the left-hand side, we have the current fitness landscape. So that is in this simple illustration is such that the phenotype is described just one variable. So it is here on the horizontal axis. That's a variant trait. And this graph here tells that what is the fitness of an individual having a specific whatever variant trait would appear. And then this red dot here, that denotes the current strategy of the resident population. We here, for simplicity, assume that all resident individuals have the same strategy. And then, as we notice in this case, that the fitness landscape is kind of a hill. And then, okay, what would naturally happen that the population starts to go, or the trait distribution starts to go uphill. So then all traits left from this point have, at least nearby here, have positive fitness. So they are expected to grow and maybe invade the resident population. And then on the right-hand side, we have then a long-term picture of what happens. So this, on the horizontal axis, we have the evolutionary time. And then the current state is marked by this red dot here and this vertical line. And then when we start going forward in the trait dynamics, what happens is that the trait of the population decreases and decreases, and then but all the time also the fitness landscape changes. So let's make steps. So now when we make steps, you notice that this red dot moves left, and also in this plot it moves down. You will already see where it will go from this graph, and you notice that the shape of this fitness landscape changes in each step, and that is the important feature in analyzing evolution by natural selection in general in models, that the fitness landscape is not static. So this is kind of walking in a changing fitness landscape, and you follow the slope, or so-called the selection gradient or fitness gradient, the slope of the fitness landscape. And then what happens in this case, that while you take steps, then the fitness landscape changes, and eventually we find out that we are in a situation where the slope of the fitness landscape is 0. So now we have reached a point that there is no directional selection, and then all other variants, so if compared, so different from the present resident, they have negative fitness, or fitness actually in this case less than 1, because of that we used fitness measure, and that means they can't invade this resident system. So we have reached an evolutionary system, or unbeatable trait here. So this is one possibility what can happen in evolutionary dynamics, but or qualitatively, like what things can happen. But this is certainly not the only one. And next, I will show a bit different illustration that, again, of the same type. We see the fitness landscape and then the traits present in the current population, but the dynamics will be different. So now, again, here on the left-hand side, we have the fitness landscape. And now, as you notice, it looks quite steep here, this fitness landscape. So again, we start to make steps left, or that means that the resident trait will decrease. And then while that happens, now as we go forward, the fitness landscape changes. So we are kind of going uphill, but eventually at some point we notice that we are on a valley. And of course, this could not happen in a static fitness landscape. If you all the time walk uphill, you kind of, if you walk here in Okinawa, you have many hills here, and if you walk uphill, then eventually you will reach the mountaintop. At least if you don't have some problems in climbing. But in this case, since the landscape changes with every step, it's completely possible that in a model what happens that you go uphill, but you find out eventually you are in a valley. And what then will happen is that there can be coexistence of different traits. And that is what happens next. So then the population will become, so to say, dimorphic, so that now there are 2 residents with potentially different population densities, and certainly they have different traits. And there will be divergent selection. So the traits of these 2 residents will start to evolve away from each other. So since now, especially in this plot, you start to notice that for this resident trait, it's the variants who have smaller strategy have positive fitness can invade, whereas for this resident trait, those traits that are larger than this one have again such fitness that they can invade and replace the former resident. And as a result, these strategies will diverge from each other, and eventually, in this, what happens in this example is that we reach an unbeatable coalition of 2 resident traits. So then in this situation, now if you look at the fitness landscape on the left, we are kind of at the same time on 2 mountaintops. So one resident is on one mountaintop and the other one is on the other. So this is an unbeatable coalition of resident strategies. And the process in which this divergent selection results in this kind of coexistence is called evolutionary branching. But then the previous plots were such that the graphs were looking quite continuous, but then in reality, or in a bit more realistic models, a bit more so to say, then these graphs will not necessarily be smooth. So if you plot the present strategies as a function of time, then these variants, they can arrive at random times, and also the trait difference between a variant and a resident is not infinitesimally small. It's probably small, but not so small that we would get a continuous curve. So we have this kind of a trait plot where they have these jumps of when new traits appear that manage to be invasive and persist in the population for some time. Okay, so far now we have two qualitatively different cases. We have evolution to an unbeatable strategy, and then we have evolution branching, which can result in coexistence of several phenotypes. And this, in different models, this could go further. We could have branching to 3 or 4 or 5, or it depends on the model that to how many traits could coexist in such a model. But then let's next before I then tell you about a third option, what can happen. Let's look more about the way that how do we construct these mathematical models in the first place. So what would we need to take into account? And then I will walk you through one example, hopefully not with too many equations, and then I try to also illustrate with pictures that illustrate what happens in the model. And then we show a similar illustration as just before, that what happens in a specific case in that model in the evolutionary process. So the process of mathematical modeling of natural selection in this way that I've described is that, so first we build this mathematical model of describing the ecology, so the population dynamics. So let's look at that in more detail, what that means. So when we construct these models, we need to start from the individual level. So we describe what do the individuals do, and then these events, so essential events concerning population dynamics are, for example, reproduction. So if depending on the species you have in mind, reproduction can be resulting from birth events, or maybe you produce seeds, or maybe you have cell division in unicellular organisms. So that reproduction results in the increase of population, and then death, on the other hand, then that decreases the population size. And then death can be a result of some natural reason, so just you die of old age, or then can be also some aggressive interactions that maybe you fight with somebody, and the result of that fight is lethal. Then also we can model use of resources, such as it can be foraging or hunting. Again, depends on what kind of species we are talking about, what this resource use means. And then also we can model dispersal, so moving from one place to another. Usually dispersal also means that you move from your birth site to a different site that you reproduce elsewhere that were born. And then also if you want to model more details of individuals, then you can also model the change of status of individuals, such as that are they juveniles or adults. So in many species, like newborns are not able to reproduce immediately after birth. They need to grow maybe in size or mature, that they can themselves reproduce. And then also you can measure like growth of individuals if you like in this model. And then once you have listed all these processes what to take into account in the model in the individual level, then the population dynamics results in straightforward bookkeeping. So then the important thing is that what you do, what you assume on the individual level, and then the rest is really straightforward. It of course can be complicated mathematics, but it's bookkeeping essentially of the population densities or population sizes or whatever you need to describe the status of the current population. And today I will especially talk about specific model defined in continuous time, and then such models are good when important events happen throughout the year, whereas of course in some other species when we have seasonal climate, well, maybe some seasons here as well, but not so much as compared to Finland, for example, where we have snow in the winter, then it certainly affects that different capabilities of individuals. Whereas continuous time models are good if the climate is more or less the same type throughout the year. And then in these models, then we describe different rates, or so to say, we describe the speed that different events what they happen. And then once we have described these various speeds of or rates of events, and then we get the system of so-called differential equations. So differential equation is a system of equations where the system tells that what is the rate of change of each variable, so that with which speed a certain variable increases or decreases. And then now we will look a bit more detail of a so-called asymmetric competition model, and I will tell you now the details of what I assume for that model. So in that model we have three possible events. We have birth, so individuals so giving birth to other individuals, and for simplicity assume that there's no age structure in the model, so that newborns are immediately also capable of reproducing themselves. And then assume that this birth rate, so the rate at which one individual gives birth to another individual, depends on your own individual trait, but also on the total population density. So there is some feature in the model that affects how the total population affects births, and especially this happens through the total population density. So the constitution of the population plays no role, only your own trait and then the total population density. Then we have a constant death rate because of just natural causes of death. But then we also have aggressive interactions, and then these are randomly occurring with the law of mass action. So it's also familiar from physics or chemistry that when you have two ingredients in a bottle, when you mix this bottle, then it depends on the density of each component, or more likely the product of the components plus some reaction rate that tells us how many reactions happen in a certain time interval. And the analogous thing in here, so that these aggressive interactions happen when these different individuals meet, and then it matters that what is your own phenotype. So then what happens is that in these aggressive interactions, it can be that the loser may die, and then the one who has higher phenotype value has an advantage. And let's then look at more details. So first about the birth. So now, sorry, there are now some equations, hopefully not too much. So now this birth rate is a product of two things. So this function rho of s, so it's the part of depending on your own individual trait. And then this an divided by 1 plus n, that is the part depending on the total population density. And then the first part is plotted here on the left. So there we'll see that that trait with value 1 is the best concerning this component. So that if your phenotype is equal to 1, then you have potentially the highest birth rate. And then if you decrease or increase from 1, then you will lose in the birth rate. And then this part tells that how the population density affects birth rate. So then in in this model, there is so-called a Lee effect, which means that it's actually good for birth that there are other individuals around. This is common in models with require 2 individuals for reproduction. That if the population is too scarce, then it's maybe difficult to find a partner to reproduce with. So this qualitative function now takes into account such a feature. Then how about then these aggressive interactions? So then now those happen based on the law of mass action. But then now that 2 individuals have met and they are starting to fight, then what is the result of such a fight? Then this function beta tells about the risk of death, and it depends on the trait difference of what is my trait and the opponent's trait. In such a way that if my trait is bigger, then my risk of death is smaller. But if the opponent has bigger trait, so then this difference is negative, then I have a higher risk of death. So this brings in the asymmetry, so that all in these competition events, then it's always better to have a higher trait value. And you can maybe now already imagine that this can result in two kind of selective pressures. So on the one hand, it would be good to have the trait value as close to 1 as possible, because that gives the largest birth rate. But on the other hand, in these contests or aggressive interactions, it's better to have larger trait. So now these both features in the model, they affect the selection pressure and the fitness landscape, and then what happens as a result of natural selection in this model. And now a few technical things. You can just skip this if you don't like equations. I will now show just a few. So then, as a result, when we build this model, we get this system of differential equations, which now tells what is the growth rate, the growth rate of individuals of making a population with which have trait Si. So then now Ni is the population density of the individuals that have a trait Si, and now then d per dt Ni is the rate of change, and when we divide it by Ni, that tells the per capita rate of change. And now that comes from 3 terms. We have the birth rate, which we described first. We have the natural death rate, so therefore we have minus sign here, and then we have the direct competitions. So this is there's a constant c describing the rate of these events occurring. That how and then nj. And then when we sum over all other all other populations, we multiply with the function beta, because that not with the trait difference. So that tells the difference of my trait and then that of the other individuals times the population density of the others. And as a result, eventually we will get this. This tells us now what is the population growth rate. Then, now that we have formed this equation, then we want to find the population dynamical attractors. So the equilibria. So on what state does the rate of change in the population become 0? And now in the plot on the left, we have the population growth rate of a population when all have the same strategy. Now we have just fixed one value. It's somewhere close. The rate is 0.5. Then this graph tells us what is the growth rate of in the population density. And then this is an equilibrium here marked with the dot. And what is special in this plot is that we have actually several other equilibria. We have 0 equilibrium, but that is extinction. And we are more like interested in positive equilibria. And then there is another positive equilibrium here, but it is population dynamically unstable. So the population dynamics will not approach that one. So this marked with red is the stable population dynamical equilibrium. And then on the right, we can plot how the equilibria change as a function of the trait of the resident population. So for some values, it happens that there is no positive equilibria at all, so the population is not viable. And then for intermediate values of the resident trait, we observe that there is this positive stable equilibrium and also this positive unstable equilibrium, and we will reach a maximal population density for trait S equals 1. But then next we want to know, okay, what happens if there's a rare mutant? How does it experience the environment? And now, sorry, this is the slide with the largest amount of equations. Maybe it's enough if that I just give you the idea, but here it's shown in the concrete case. So we look at what is the system of these differential equations if we have two traits. We have the resident trait and the variant trait with population densities nres and nvar. And this is just from the system what we wrote before. And next we ask, what is the growth rate of this variant if the variant population size is almost 0 and the resident is at equilibrium? Then we get this equation here, and that is our fitness function. This gives us the fitness landscape. And next I will show in figures what happens in this model, but this is for those who might be interested in the actual equations. This is what we do in practice, but now the basic idea is that take the population dynamics in such a way that there are these residents and variants, assume that the variant size is very, very small, and then calculate what is the growth rate of the variant in the environment given by the resident population. And next we will get a similar sequence of plots what we had before with some additions. So now on the left here, we have again the fitness landscape. And here we have what happens in evolutionary time. So we start at evolutionary time 0, and then time starts to move forward. And already from this figure, we see that, okay, the traits will increase. That is because here the slope of fitness landscape is positive. So traits with a bit larger than this resident have a positive fitness. But then in addition, I have plotted here two more things. So these are from the previous slide, but now they start to change when we choose the different trait values. So this one shows us the growth rate as a function of the population density for a resident population. And this tells us what is the equilibrium population size as a function of the resident trait. And now again, we start moving forward in the fitness landscape. And then the fitness landscape changes all the time. As you can notice here, the point where the resident moves to the right, and all the time the resident has 0 fitness because it is at an equilibrium. And then we move to the right and move to the right and move to the right. And then now you notice also here that the population growth rate function, this also changes. And then we eventually reach this point, which is at the so-called extinction boundary. So it happens here that traits that have a larger value than this value, they can no longer persist. They don't have a positive equilibrium of population size that the population dynamics could be in. And qualitatively, what will happen, so that this growth rate function is now it's everywhere negative, but just in this value it's still positive. And then even in this situation, it is such that the fitness landscape is such that mutants or variants that have a strategy larger than that of the resident have positive fitness. So these variants who cannot persist alone, they can still invade, they can grow in the environment set by the resident, and they can invade. But now, since they cannot persist alone, what will happen? The whole population will go extinct. So it's like a kamikaze variant, that it is successful in invasion, but at the same time it kills itself and the resident in the same go. And this process is called evolutionary suicide or selection-driven extinction. So now we have a third possibility. What kind of features can we have in evolutionary models? So we can have evolution to some one. So there we have just one unbeatable strategy. We can have evolution branching, which results in increase in the complexity of how many traits we can have coexistence. So coexistence increases, or we can have evolutionary suicide, which means a decrease in the amount of these traits coexisting, even in such a dramatic way that it can be that the whole population goes extinct as a result of natural selection. And after that example, then if now that notice that it's possible that that natural selection leads to extinction, it's quite far from optimality. So it's certainly, this is not an optimization process. Yes?
Made more official. So the population that bears the resident trait goes to extinction, but why would the variant with this variant trait go to extinction? Why wouldn't it just supplement the rest of the population and it becomes like a new species or something?
The reason in this model is that because the goodness of a phenotype or a trait depends not only on your own behavior but also on the environment set by the whole population. So in this case, it's so that that in the environment set by the resident, this variant does good. It can grow and invade, but then when the resident population starts to decrease, and then what happens is that in the environment that this variant creates itself, the variant can no longer persist. So it is this that it's the difference between that the fitness landscape is not just fixed, so that it depends on what I do plus what everybody else has been doing. And then what looks beneficial is that just from my point of view, it's that it's for example about also studies of cooperation, that if everybody else is cooperating, then I might be tempted to be a free rider. So then that means that, oh, okay, is it public transport or pollution or whatever is this public resource? Everybody else is doing good, but I decide no, I don't cooperate and I benefit from this. So then when everybody thinks like this, then what if everybody stops cooperating? Then it might be that the situation is much worse, and then maybe the population doesn't anymore even persist without cooperation. So it's this conflict between individual level and population level benefits. And for example, yes, but then so this kind of this evolutionary suicide can happen also in models where it's not so clear that what like a cooperation means. It's not necessarily a cooperative trait, but something else. And that this, but in anyway, the main reason is that it's from the individual level benefits. So it's how I should change my strategy or how the trait should evolve is that what is beneficial in the current environment. But this doesn't take into account that how the environment changes when everybody does this decision, or when the whole population trait composition changes. So that's the key point here. And thank you for asking. Okay, then I'll briefly mention about metapopulations. So that's another topic what I've been interested in my scientific career. So metapopulations, they describe populations in fragmented landscapes. So we can have different habitat patches and then dispersal connecting such habitat patches. And then metapopulation then is this collection of all local populations all together. And then how we can model metapopulations. So of course it's clear that in the real world the habitats are no longer in many places like big continuous areas, but they are really fragmented. But how should we model them? We can think of the structure of where the patches are located in many different ways. Maybe we have some kind of regular lattice, or maybe some irregular structure, or mainland island composition. Then we can use also many other differences in modeling. We can use a continuous time model, or discrete time model, or a semi-discrete, so combination of those. We can model local population sizes with densities or numbers of individuals. We can have different types of stochasticity. Either there's no stochasticity, so the model is deterministic, or we have demographic or environmental stochasticity, or even such that we have catastrophes. So it's an event that kills the local population, but the habitat patch remains habitable, can be recolonized by immigrants. And dispersal can be local, so just the neighboring patches, or global through a dispersal pool. It can be conditional, so depends on some local conditions when you move or when you don't, or then it can be unconditional, or can happen just immediately after birth. Like for plants, we usually seeds disperse only at birth, but grown trees seldom will walk away. Whereas then for other species, like mammals, they can decide to move throughout their lifetime. So from this, you can see that there are really many things you can model differently in different metapopulations. So then covering all different metapopulations in one talk is simply not possible. And also even in one career, it's cannot really study all metapopulations. So I've tried to study such metapopulations that have made some that I've been interested in, and make some overall understanding of evolution of dispersal in metapopulations in general. So in the remaining talk, I will briefly tell you about general mechanisms promoting or selecting against dispersal, and then an idea how in metapopulation models one would calculate so-called metapopulation fitness or metapopulation reproduction ratio, which can then be used in adaptive dynamics to study evolution by natural selection. And I'll illustrate one specific metapopulation model very briefly. So if you think that there's one individual here in one habitat patch on the left, and then in the current, so it is this nice individual here. It's living in a patch with two plants, and then it might consider, what if I move? Could I find some better place? So then I might have benefits if I move to another site with more plants, more resources. But then it might be not so good idea after all, because if I go to that place with so many plants, maybe there's more competition that it's not beneficial to go there after all. And it also even could be that what if I'm used to this specific plant species in my own place? If I move, maybe the plants are completely different, and I don't like them, or I can't eat them. What then? And it also could be that something that in the place where I'm living currently, it might be that personally, if I move away, it's not so good thing for me. But if I leave, then I leave more resources to my relatives. So then in this case, these two individuals are related. They can be even clones, so that they essentially share exactly the same genes. So if I move away, then there's better resources for the one who was left behind, and then it's overall better from evolution point of view, because my genes will get more spread if I get, or if my clones will get good amounts of offspring. So then, as a result, there are many things what can affect the evolution of dispersal, and then here are some model features that have been noted to select either for or against dispersal. So temporal heterogeneity in different forms has been shown to promote dispersal, and also this kin competition promotes of the dispersal. Whereas if you have a constant environment or so-called equilibrium population dynamics, that often selects against dispersal, and also local adaptation, and direct cost of dispersal often selects against dispersal. So if it's very risky to move, you have high chance of dying during dispersal, then dispersal might not be so a good idea. And then let's then look at the way that how we can calculate fitness in the metapopulation model. We can calculate what happens in a sequence of dispersal generations. We start from one disperser, who is in a model of global dispersal, is in dispersal pool. Then with some probability, it arrives to some local patch with some conditions, and then so it immigrates maybe successfully there. And then, as long as this individual is still present in that patch, or one of its descendants are present in that patch, we call it a mutant colony. And then throughout the lifetime of the mutant colony, it will send dispersers to the dispersal pool, and we count the overall number of dispersers produced by this mutant colony, and then average that over all possible events or possible conditions what this first immigrant may experience. And that is the metapopulation reproduction ratio. And it's in different metapopulation models that it's technically there's different how one calculates it, but this is the idea. And now I will show just one illustration of what could happen in some metapopulation model. That here we have a habitat patch. This circle here corresponds to this habitat patch, which has one resident, so this black individual, and this variant with this green individual. And here to the right, we start to collect all the variant dispersers that this mutant colony has produced throughout its lifetime. So the mutant colony is now born when this variant arrives here, and then there are various population dynamical events what can happen. And now this is a random simulation. So what happens next? The variant gives birth. Then one variant emigrates. Then a resident gives birth. Then a resident immigrates. Then a resident dies. Then a resident gives birth. And then a variant emigrates. And at that point, now the mutant colony is dead. Now there's no more mutants left from, or variants left from the first immigrant. So then now the mutant colony is dead, and it produced two individuals to the dispersal pool throughout its lifetime. So this is just one event. Then we would run these simulations many times and take the average what happens, and then that is the metapopulation reproduction ratio. Of course, as a mathematician, I don't maybe so much like to do simulations if I don't have to. So in different models, I can do this with mathematical theory, but I'm not going into details in this talk. So then, so the idea, what I just described, so we calculate the reproduction ratio from one dispersal generation to the next dispersal generation here. And then in some specific model, then when we then get the metapopulation fitness from this, then we can plot what is the evolution, what is the dispersal trait as a result of evolution as a function of some parameters, and then interpret the results. But I'm not now going more with the details of that. Just gives the idea that even in complex metapopulations, it's possible to calculate this metapopulation fitness and do evolution analysis. So then to conclude, in mathematical modeling of evolution by natural selection, there are various steps what one does and one needs to take into account. So the eco-evolutionary feedback loop or eco-environmental feedback loop is that the present population affects the environment, and then the current environment determines what is the fitness landscape. So it determines what is the fitness of each individual phenotype present in the population, and as a result, the population densities change. And then when the population density has changed, then also the environment set by the resident has changed. And this goes on and on and on, and can result in interesting evolutionary phenomena, such as convergence to an unbeatable trait, or evolutionary branching, which means that we have a coexistence of 2 or even more traits, and then these traits diverge away from each other. And then we can have even evolutionary suicide. So there we have a conflict between individual and population level benefits, and that can result to extinction of the evolving population, which especially underscores that evolution is not an optimization process. It is so much more. And thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kalle. I hope it was sufficiently appealing also for the biologists, not too much math. I think you did a great job, very nicely presented didactically. We have time for some questions, and please use the microphones for the Zoom participants. Anybody? Yeah, would you pass a microphone over there?
So thank you for your great talk, and I have a question about the choice about the low and the beta in the model you showed in the first half of the presentation. So I think the design of the birth rate and the kind of the win probability or something like beta is important because it means that the individuals with a higher value over S are likely to win, but they have low, kind of lower probability for reproduction. So I think that the exact choice of the low and beta are so important for this analysis. But how did you choose these 2 functions? You just choose choose some functions that are easier to analyze, but or you have some other ideas behind the this design of the mathematical model?
Okay, so the specific choice for what the functions are is not so important in this specific case. This is more like a kind of a toy model or example model that can demonstrate that this kind of feature is in principle possible. But then if one would like to study more of that exact functional forms, then one should go to more details and what kind of go to so-called mechanistic modeling process that what are the different features, what the actual differences in traits are that cause these differences. And then I haven't in this model not gone to that level. So in this model is just the qualitative phenomena, so the qualitative shape of the functions, so that for this competition function, the important thing is that it's asymmetric, so that this, as you see, that this slope that it's so 0 would mean that the traits are the same, but now it's asymmetric because at 0.5 here and minus 0.5 the values are different. Then that's just a qualitative thing that in this case that bigger trait is better. That's a qualitative feature of this graph. And then here that again also this just shows it's a qualitative feature that it has a peak at a certain point, and then so that it would be good to, from the point of view of trying to maximize just the birth rate, to choose trait as close as 1 as possible. But again, this is just a qualitative choice of the function.
I think I understand your point here, but I'm also curious that with whether the result remains the same if you, for example, choose more aggressive functions for beta, so in your choice of the beta, so if the S is enough large, so their strongness is not much different. But I'm a bit curious that if you have choose more linear functions, whether the results can be remain the same or a bit different?
Okay, so the slope does affect the evolution dynamics. So if the slope is very small, then you would expect evolution quite close to S to 1. But if the slope is bigger, then we can have this feature. And in the paper where I have studied this, we did study different parameter values. But just for this presentation, I choose to show just the one resulting, or one example resulting in evolutionary suicide. This study is actually from it's one paper in my PhD thesis. This paper is published in 2001, so it's quite some time ago. I can also show you the reference for it. So this asymmetric competition model is the second reference here. So by Mats Gillenberg and myself, so my PhD thesis advisor at that time, and it is published in Bulletin for Mathematical Biology in 2001.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
Yeah, thank you. So given you've done this in 2001 in your thesis, and I know this sounds a little dark, but it feels like humans on average are doing evolutionary suicide from me as a biologist, and I've done some metapopulation math and meta-community stuff, so thank you for that as well. But I was curious, in addition to theory, have people sort of maybe quantified and looked at the sensitivity of the human population and how we're some types of people tend to be in power and certain types of people tend to like just the different dynamics, because that's more human political things have, because a lot of this you could model certain species of organisms, but I feel like we're doing it within our own species. So is there anyone who's studying it applied to humans, or is it mostly done with certain types of organisms?
Yeah, so this is a good point, certainly, that of course these models as such are based on the idea that we have like the traits are inherited by like really the offspring inherited traits, but one could use the same type of mathematics also for models where behavior is learned from others, so like humans do, or then just humans can just decide throughout their lifetime to decide to do different things by they maybe imitate some role models or whatever. So this type of models could be applied also to human behavior, and then it might be that somebody is studying the human behavior from this point of view. I certainly hope that we will be more clever than what some features what humans are doing in some parts of the world currently, that we will learn from our own behavior and decide to do better. But there are also these risks in various decision making and political things, that it might be that for example politicians who make decisions that on the short term seem like good things, but are not good in the long run, that then people vote for those who decide to do that. I want this thing now, and then it's more maybe appealing for the big audience to vote for such people, or at least for some people to do that. So there can be this kind of conflict in
because I think we have like climate modeling, which I've done some stuff in, and we've done like biodiversity modeling, but it would be interesting to be like choice of populations within human modeling and see, because if that showed all these doomsday people like, oh, because I've always wondered why politicians aren't more likely to, if we were thinking more long term, like some indigenous cultures having more like a 7-generation principle of like making sure that your children's are okay. So like not all cultures are the same. So it's just interesting. Thank you so much for your answer.
And also this climate change modeling, or what, like pollution, and what then this is like a common good, and it is viable to potential like problems in cooperation and defecting. So it's
And I'm like, I think we're kind of doing the same thing. So it's not any different, but we're aware of it. So I think that's really bad. Yeah.
There actually is a book by Neil Diamond called Collapse, published about 10 years ago. He's an evolutionary biologist. And qualitatively, he uses similar ideas that decision makers may go for short-term benefits, but then ruin the livelihood of their society, which then subsequently collapses. Yeah, I think the math, if you would spell it out, would be very similar to what Kalle presented. Yes, please.
I do? Okay. Most of people in the room are probably from a biology background, and you mentioned at the beginning mathematics and physics are not like biology. Biology is messy. And if you go for evolution, but taking everything in it, there's a lot of error that's going to happen. How do you deal with this in your models? Because is there ground truth, or it's just pure maths, or?
Okay, so in my research, I try to understand qualitatively what happens in different models. So I don't try to say that my specific model would exactly model that species living in that place, and I don't try to forecast that for that species what happens exactly to that. I want to understand more about the phenomenon, what kind of general circumstances result in the phenomena what we observe here, and then for that, so one modeling principle is that on one hand I also do like simple models, so that if already a simple model can demonstrate some specific feature in that some evolution process happening there, then it can be maybe quite widespread, or also that since I've also studied quite many different metapopulation models in my career, then I want to understand overall that when this mechanism is present in a metapopulation model, then we can see this kind of features. So this kind of more robust understanding, so that no model can really take into account everything, and then also they shouldn't. If you take too much into account in the model, then your model becomes too complicated. You can't really do anything with it. So then there's a balance between simple and more complicated models, and I'm more in understanding the qualitative messages, what we can tell from those.
Any advice for an experimentalist who just moved to modeling 4 months ago?
Probably I can give you some references to read, and that's one thing, and then let's say be open-minded, and so that because in one way, in some sense, in mathematics, one often in different courses in mathematics, one learns different mathematical tools. But then the reality is kind of the other way around, that you have a problem, you don't know in advance that what kind of mathematical tool then fits best that problem. So then be open-minded about that, what kind of mathematics you would like to use for that, and then discuss with other people about that, about the potentials to model.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we have 2 more hands up. I give you the microphone first.
Since I'm not a modeler at all, I'm a geneticist, I just wonder if you, in your model of population change in the first part of the talk, why didn't you put the 4th component there, indirect competition, when 2 individuals don't compete directly with each other, but for example, you know, the preponderance of one changes the environment so that the other one doesn't survive very well, something like that. Would it not matter for your type of evolutionary suicide study?
Well, that's, for example, the competition for resources is indirect, so it is there. So whatever so in the environment we take into account anything what affects the growth of the population. So it can be that so let's say we have some species that uses two different resources, like two different plants that what they like to eat, and then whatever is the current composition of the population, how they use the plants, that affects what is the equilibrium density of these two plants, and then the individuals can decide to try to use one more or the other more, and then there's some trade-off and that kind of things. So it's and so there's indirect competition in this model, and so it is included in the system.
And Jakub?
Usually, at least based on most of the model and studies I saw, most of the times just investigate the evolution of like either population or the environment or things like that. And so far I never saw anybody try to couple effects of change of the population and the environment, and it might create like a fire and backfire loop, something like that. But is this framework capable of providing us with a tool to investigate this case?
Yeah, so then it's just that when you build your model, you describe that whatever the population is that you are analyzing, that what do you need to know to calculate its population dynamics. That might be like different resources, or there's direct competition, whatever you have there, then that all together that makes up the environment, and then you need to just analyze the population dynamics of that first, and then analyze then what happens to a rare variant and so on. It works also in that kind of cases. It can be quite complicated in a complicated model, but in principle, it is the same framework.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, any further questions, comments? And if that's not the case, let's thank the...
There was one.
I was about to.
Okay.
So let's do that together.
Thank you.